My name is Grant Cameron, and the way I got into the UFO field was very simple. It was 1975. I lived just north of the American border, above North Dakota, about 60 miles from the border. And what happened was there was a small town called Carmen, Manitoba, where there was a bunch of UFO sightings taking place, and it went on for the entire year. It started in February. I live in a big city, 600, 700,000 people. And the local media was carrying the story. And I had no interest in UFOs. I can't ever remember having thought about extraterrestrial life or anything. I was interested in near-death experiences because I had done a study at the hospitals with chaplains. And I had gone to the hospitals to ask all sorts of weird questions like, do people ever predict their death? Does anybody ever see someone coming to pick them up just before they die, a relative comes to pick them up? Does anybody have a near-death experience? All this kind of stuff. Does anybody ever predict their death? So I asked these things, and I did a paper when I was at the university, and I was interested in Edgar Cayce, but I can't remember ever thinking about UFOs. So what happened was these sightings started, and we used to drive around the city as young 20-some-year-old kids. So instead of driving around the city, I said, let's go out and to Carmen, and let's see what everybody's looking at. My friend said, okay, we'll do it, and we didn't do it. We didn't do it for 3 months. What happened in 3 months later was May of 1975. The local TV station managed to catch this thing jumping off the ground. They had it surrounded on the ground, and there was a film crew there, and they managed to catch this thing as it jumped off the ground, and it became a viral story in my city. NBC News picked it up. It was a big story, and that's when I said to my friend, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. Not that I had any interest in it, and the way I describe it is, it's like buying the lottery ticket, and you know there's a chance you can win, but you know you're not going to win. I'm going to go out there, everybody else sees it, we're not going to see anything. So we went out to this small town. It was about 11 o'clock at night. We drove into town, drove out of the town, drove into town. We were looking around at stuff, and we said, what are they looking at? And we were looking at planets and stars, and well, if that's what they're looking at, it's not very impressive. We had no idea what everybody's looking at. My friend said after an hour, he said, we'll drive into town one more time. If we don't see anything, let's go home. I said, fantastic, this is a total waste of time. We turned to go back into town, and it appeared, coming from the left to the right. It looked like it was alive. Nobody in the car said, is that what they're looking at? Is that what it is? Everybody just instantly said, there it is. Everybody knew instantly because it was just so bizarre. And it was coming from the left. It was moving to the right. It was down low, moving very, very slow across the road. It wasn't a light in the sky. It was an actual object in sort of fairly close, maybe half a mile, 3/4 of a mile down the road. It was bobbing up and down. It was moving up and down. And it just like, I was just floored. I couldn't believe that I'd actually seen something. So it was going in behind this set of school buses, and I remember the car was still moving, and I was getting out of the car, it was still moving because I wanted to run through the ditch to these school buses because I knew it was going to go in behind the school buses. It was so low I wouldn't be able to see it anymore. And I just watched this thing sort of pulse away. It was pulsing, and it just flew off into the distance. I went out 2 nights later, dragged all my friends out there. There was 28 people sitting on the side road in the middle of nowhere from all different directions. And the second night it came right at us. But most of the people had left. There was only 2 cars, maybe 8 people left when the thing finally came. And that night it came right at us, and it sort of came right at us, and then it sort of moved and it sort of flew away, and it had a little green glow on the back and this red pulsing object. And I was just floored. I'm thinking, that might actually be someone from another planet. I was just floored. And then because it had been a big story in the media, then I decided to find out why nobody was investigating this. Why was nobody talking to people in town? Because the rumored story was that half the people in the town were seeing this thing. It was flying there every night. So what I did is I gathered all the material together, and I interviewed hundreds of people, and basically nobody wanted to talk. They would just say, how did you know I saw something? And I'd say, well, so-and-so told me. And then they'd go, well, I saw something, but it really was nothing. And they'd start that way. And then by the end of the interview, they would be telling you basically what they saw. And then they would say, I wasn't the only one that saw it, you know. And then they'd give you 3 or 4 names. So at one point, I had like 300 people on a list. I hadn't even interviewed yet. I put all this together in a book, in a manuscript, and I tried to get it published in 1977. And nobody would publish it. And the local publisher in this city of 700,000 people, where everybody knew about this story, said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. And I went, oh, this has been a total waste of time. And it was from that moment on, which transitioned me, is I said, all I'm interested in now, I'm not interested in anybody's sightings, what people saw. I'm not going to try to convince you what it was. All I'm interested in is, what was that object that came in front of my car that night? Somebody in this world must know what that is. I'm just a little guy on the prairies in Canada. Somebody knows. And so I started this process. First I went to the Canadian government, to what the Canadian government had known. I ended up chasing around the president of Penn State University for 8 years, and he knew what was going on, but he didn't want to talk about it. We had a bunch of researchers, and he led us to the presidents. He was going to give some of his material to the library, the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. And it was at that moment when I got to the Independence Library looking for Dr. Eric Walker from Penn State at his material. It was at that point they didn't have the material that I was looking for, and I said, what do you got on UFOs? And I'm thinking, the President of the United States has got to know. He's the most powerful man in the world. And all they had was a bunch of telegrams that had been sent to the President in 1952 when the UFOs flew over the White House. And because he had put down a shoot-down order. After the first week they were there, Truman put out a shoot-down order, and this went viral on newspapers across America. And all these people sent it in telegrams to say, Mr. President, don't shoot him down. So they had those, and they had a couple other documents. And I'm thinking, that's pretty strange. There's really nothing here. And then what happened there was down the road from Independence, Missouri is Abilene, Kansas. It's maybe 2-hour drive west, and that's where the Eisenhower Library is. So then I went to the Eisenhower Library, and you have to be interviewed. It's a very formal place. People wear suits and ties and stuff. So I went in there and I said, I want to know about the presidents, and I was going for my interview, and they had 5 documents. And I said, well, how many pages of documents do you have? They said, we have 28 million pages. And that moment I said, something's wrong here. 5 documents and there's 28 million pages, something's going on. Where are the documents? And so I started this pursuit of chasing around from library to library, presidential libraries, looking for UFO documents. Basically found out there really are none in the presidential libraries, except for letters that people send to the president, just very sort of non-classified stuff. And I did that for probably 30 years, till February the 26th, 2012. And it was at that time when I was watching Colin Andrews, the famous crop circle guy, give a lecture in Phoenix, Arizona. And I had no interest in being in the lecture. I'm not interested in crop circles. The only reason I went into the lecture, because he's a prominent guy. It's sort of like the Rolling Stones are in town. I'm not into the Rolling Stones, but let's go watch the Rolling Stones. He was like a big name. So I figured I should pay him the respect, go into his lecture, and watch him lecture. So I was in the lecture, but I didn't want to be in the lecture. I really wasn't paying attention to what he was saying, and I got what I describe as a download. This material came instantaneously into my head. It was material that I had gathered through the years. And what it does, it took 3 pieces of information that I'd gathered, it put them together in my head and basically assured me this is how it works. It came with absolute certainty, and I suddenly went, I know. It was the answer I'd been looking for since 1975. I had the answer. It was like I put on the glasses. I could now read the street signs. And it was the whole idea that consciousness, non-local consciousness, is the basis of the UFO phenomenon. That until you get away from the physical idea of UFOs and get to the fact that whoever these beings are, that they can move from the dream world into the real world, that there's this non-local, non-physical aspect to the thing, or even more directly, that consciousness is the basis of the universe, not matter. Consciousness is the basis, and you do not have a particle take a position in time and space until you have an observer, until there's consciousness. Everything's consciousness, everything's conscious, everything's alive. So all this came to me instantaneously, and then I just gave all my UFO documents. I was famous for getting the Rockefeller Initiative documents, which were the 1,000 pages of documents from the Clinton White House, when Lawrence Rockefeller went to the Clinton White House demanding UFO disclosure. And I had filed an FOIA, and I got 1,000 pages of the correspondence going back and forth between Rockefeller and the people in the Clinton White House that basically showed that the Clintons were greenlighting a Roswell report, that Rockefeller was ready to put an ad in the paper and expose the president, that the president knew what was going on and he wasn't telling. So all those documents, once I had this download experience, I said, the president knows what's going on. He's never going to tell you, and this is a waste of time. So I gave all my UFO documents away to a PhD guy in Salt Lake City, and I said, I don't need him anymore. I'm going to do consciousness now. And twice I've been dragged back into what I call the rat hole of disclosure and government. One was Hillary Clinton when she was running for president in 2016. She suddenly came out and said, if I become president, I will disclose the UFO situation. And she said, do you know, to the reporter that asked her, do you know that the most requested item at the Clinton Library is UFOs? And those were my FOIs. Because I had the Rockefeller Initiative documents, 1,000 pages, I knew all the people, all the players. So when Clinton left office, he has 5 years to review his papers after he leaves to do his memoirs and whatever, and then it's first come, first serve, FOIAs, that's how they open the documents. So you put in an FOIA report, or you put in an FOIA request for Clinton and UFOs, John Podesta and UFOs, Hillary Clinton and UFOs, Hillary Clinton and Rockefeller. See, I have put 100 FOIA reports in there. And so when Hillary's interviewed, she references these FOIAs, and I go, she's actually paying attention. They actually know what I'm doing. And so then I had so much Clinton material, I put out a book called the Clinton UFO Storybook, which talks about the very great involvement of the Clintons over the years in the UFO phenomena. They're fascinated with the UFO phenomena. They're fascinated in New Age spirituality and stuff like this. I put it out. Then I said, okay, I got to get back out of this rat hole again. And I left again. And I got back into the consciousness thing and the mind and how this all works and what I think the answer is. And just recently, I just put out a book about a week ago called Managing Magic, the Government's UFO Disclosure Plan. And I've been dragged back in again because what's happened is Tom DeLonge, who's was a lead singer of Blink-182, very, very powerful rock star, sold 30 million albums, has a big YouTube channel, also has, whenever he tweets, he gets like 15,000 retweets of what he puts out. Very powerful guy. Has been contacted by the government. 10 witnesses, he says, inside the government who are providing him material. When I saw that, I said, I've seen this before. In fact, I've seen this 50 times before. They're doing it again. And so I wrote this book, which details from 1945 all the way up to the present time, how they contacted Walt Disney to do a documentary, how they contacted a guy by the name of Bob Emenegger to do 2 documentaries, how they fed material that most of what we believe in the UFO community, we have not figured out. It has been leaked to us through documents that we think are phony, and the documents probably are phony, but they have true material. So then I wrote this thing to counter, to describe this process that I believe the government's using. And I describe it as 14 magicians. These are people that have been briefed. They're generally retired CIA people who are there to get the material into the public. Then there are 5 messiahs, who are people who believe that it is their mission to bring disclosure to the people. One is Stephen Greer, one is Tom DeLonge, one is Bill Moore, and these people who believe, and these are the people they leak the material to. And these people all have sort of flaws in their character, so that what happens is, for example, when Stephen Greer puts stuff forward, he puts it out and everybody goes, it's Stephen Greer, he's this, he's that, and people hate Stephen Greer, but the story gets out. So I wrote this book to detail that, and the other thing that I spend a lot of time on now is I'm one of the people who believes there are no evil aliens, there are no evil governments, there are no evil nations, there are no evil nothing. We are souls reincarnating life after life after life, and within everybody, there is good and there's evil. You do good things, you do bad things, I do good things, do bad things. And what Tom DeLonge's statement, and because he's such a powerful figure in the media, his idea is that the Greys are evil and that we are going to use nuclear weapons and we're going to detonate nuclear weapons in the high atmosphere and we're going to take out the Greys. And I said, there is no way he is going to put this out into the public without somebody given the other side of the story. So that's why I got dragged back in again. I said, at first I'm going to write an article countering this evil alien thing, and then I realized this thing that he's not being used, but he's being managed. So what they do is they take people with very high ego levels, very assured of themselves, and they say, we're your friend, you're the smartest guy in the business, we want to help you, and of course they go along with this, and they put this material out, and it gets out because most people say, Tom DeLonge has these crazy songs about sex and stuff, and he's a wild man. So the story gets discounted and the story gets out. Because what they want to do, in my opinion, there's 3 options. The government can either disclose, and they're not disclosing, because if they were going to disclose, they'd get the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and Fox News, and they'd take them underground with the cameras. They'd show them the bodies, the craft, they'd give them a letter from the President of the United States, they would provide them whatever documents they want, and it would be over. They're not disclosing. They're also not covering up. People say the government's covering up, and I say they're not. I'm from Canada, and for 42 years I've worked on this, and people will say to me, because you work on the US presidents, what's happening in Canada? And I always say, I have no idea. I don't even know if the Canadian government's even involved in UFOs. Because if you want to cover it up, you just shut up and quit talking about it, and the story will go away. That's not what's happening in the United States. There's leaks, there's documents, there's CIA people who I can actually name, who actually at one point last week invited me into this circle. We'll put you in the phone conversation. So there's this kind of stuff of this leaking, which means they're not covering up. They're doing something in between. They're not covering up and they're not disclosing. They're doing this middle thing where they're doing what's called acclimatization. That apparently think tanks were given this problem in the 1960s, and they all came to the same conclusion, that if you release this, there will be a meltdown in society for various reasons. And therefore you have to acclimatize the people to bring them up to speed that we are not alone in the universe, that there's something else there. You cannot drop this in front of the people before the people are really ready for it. And so they're going through this process, and they've been doing it for 70 years. And so I do that, and then hopefully now I can get back out of the Tom DeLonge and the disclosure thing and get back to the consciousness, because I think that is where the answer is, this conscious element to UFOs. Okay, when it comes to the question of the government and our role in what they're doing, I would say that there's an expression inside Jim Semivan, who is an ex-CIA official who is actually running the Tom DeLonge thing, basically said, you get what you put out, or you attract what you put out. And this comes to this idea that people describe very traumatic experiences with aliens and stuff like that. The same as in near-death experiences. People will describe encountering evil aliens and evil beings and stuff like that. You'll have these negative things. In psychedelic experiences, people will describe encountering a devil. So this is the whole concept that you produce the world, that we are all together collectively through our subconsciouses creating this world. And what happens with the government is that we believe in self rather than oneness. So I say the big problem in the world is understanding the difference between oneness and separation. What we're preaching in the world is separation. It's me versus you, good guy versus bad guy, and I'm always the good guy. So because I'm the good guy, then the Chinese are the bad guys, the Arabs are the bad guys, and then now we've translated to the aliens are the bad guys. And what Ronald Reagan said when he was in power, and he probably knew what he was talking about, he said how the world would unite if faced with a threat from an alien civilization. We'd all realize we're just God's children. And this is the oneness message. And what I say, this is the other key. There's consciousness and then there's a oneness message. And the oneness message says that there's just one world government. So there's just one world, there's just people, there's just souls reincarnating, and that everything is connected, we're all one. And there's even been experiencers who have actually been shown these messages. And the one particular one was a woman who was taken to her father. Her father, she's up behind her father, and she said to the aliens, why are you showing me this? And they said, just watch, just watch. And her father's sitting at this kitchen table with this checkered tablecloth on there. And then he takes the fork with his right hand and he drives it into his left hand, and the blood's shooting out. She's going, why did you show me this? Why did you show me this? And they said, Sherry, this is the lesson of oneness. What you do to others, you might as well do to yourself. And that's this whole concept that that everybody is the same. There are no evil people. But the way we've set it up is we have separation, therefore we're the good guys, and there's these bad guys, and we have to be protected. So we have the military protects us, we have the government protect us, and we have this identity of being part of a group. So we're Americans, and that's one of the reasons. In the book I detailed the 64 reasons why the government has decided not to tell you the truth. And one is nationalism. It's the last refuge of scoundrels. So it's like, we'll have one world government, but the United States of America is still going to run it. It's like we're not going to, are the Americans ready to say we're no longer Americans, we're world people? So we have this, we come into these little camps where it's us, the Americans, and then all the evil people. So we spend a lot of money on military because we have these perceived enemies, when in fact, when you meet those people, or you're one of those people, or if you reincarnate as one of those people in your next life, it doesn't mean you're evil, it just means you're going to experience those other things, that everybody's the same. So that's where the problem with the government comes from, that the government plays this game that we are here to save you, we are here to help you, and people are kind of lazy, so people really are willing to hand off their power to the government, and they buy into this fear thing. There's either, in the universe, there's either love or fear. Fear is the absence of love. That if you get rid of, if you realize everything is love, everything is one, then the fear goes away. But they play on the fear that we're single, we need help, and so you buy into the government protecting us, that we are special, everybody else is not special, God has chosen our nation, whatever your nation is, and that's where you sort of cycle down where if you can say there's evil aliens, which is what Tom DeLonge was going to put out, which is the ultimate false flag. There's, Werner von Braun said from 1974 to 1977 to his assistant that the government would use a number of different ways. First, they would say that there's the Russians. You've got to be protected against the Russians. Then it would be asteroids. Then it would be terrorists. And the final and the ultimate false flag would be evil aliens, an alien invasion. That we've got to take on these aliens, they're evil, we have to kill them. And people will buy into that, the same as they do in terms of movies. You have this adversarial thing, that what we found in movies is that people don't want to do alien movies if it has a good message, because it doesn't have that adversarial me versus them. You always have to have that fight thing, and that's what happens with the government. It feeds into our wanting to be sort of separate from everybody else, believing we're real, that the government's going to protect us, and in fact, it's basically all illusion. Everything is one, and that whoever the enemy, whoever the enemy you think is, be prepared, because your next lifetime, that's probably what you're going to be. And then you're going to learn empathy, and you're also going to show the world how you're going to handle the problem being on that side of the thing. Everything is experience in the universe. Everything is learning. The universe is just growing, it's learning, and everything's connected, everything's one, especially if you look at people who do psychedelic drugs. They'll say immediately the number one thing happens, the ego is crushed, and they suddenly realize everything's alive and everything's connected. And that's the message the aliens are trying to get across. 54% of all experiencers will say they were talked to about oneness and love. They were talked about reincarnation, and what I would say in the end, based upon what I've done in the consciousness realm, talking to experiencers, is that the UFO phenomena, I will bet the farm, the UFO phenomenon is going to be a lot less physical than people think it is, and it's going to be a lot more spiritual, however you want to talk about it, than it is. And the way we have it in the world today is, because science rules the world today, it is the God, it's the priests of the modern world. Everybody in the UFO community figures like we're the Rodney Dangerfield of science. Nobody gives us any respect. And so because you feel embarrassed about being a researcher, what you want to do is you want to appease the priest class. And the priest class is the scientist. So we want to be scientific. We want to be able to be skeptical. We want to analyze. We want to weigh. We want to touch, feel, whatever. And unless you can reproduce it or show evidence of solid stuff, we're not going to believe. And that's exactly why for 70 years, we've been running around in a circle, and if you ask people, what have you discovered, they'll say, oh, we really don't know what's going on, because they're looking at it as a physical phenomena. If you get away from the physical phenomena, and you particularly, most importantly, what I say the UFO community has to do, is they've got to get away from watching lights in the sky, because you can count them till the end of the world. How many green ones there are, how many red ones there are, how many fast ones and slow ones, you're never going to learn anything. It's not until you talk to what are called the experiencers, the people who are interacting with the aliens, because the aliens are whoever the entities are, because they are definitely interacting with people. And they're giving people material, they're giving people answers, and unless we talk to the experiencers, we aren't going anywhere. And if you look at the stats, and this was done, there's a big survey done by the Free Foundation, which was started by Edgar Mitchell, and they have interviewed 4,000 experiencers. And you see all sorts of very direct patterns that when you talk to them, they're saying all the same thing. 42% of all experiencers say that they have mathematical, technical, or scientific material in their head that they did not learn in school. They have been given stuff in their head. They've been given downloads. 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe, which means they had, at some point, had been tapped into the higher self, whatever you want to call it, the Akashic field, and then it was taken away from them. As they come back into the physical, it's taken away from them. 13% of all experiencers will say they have flown the craft. They have been allowed to fly the craft. So I say when it comes to evil aliens, people will say, oh, there's evil aliens. I said, well, if you believe there's evil aliens, listen to this. If you're a woman in Saudi Arabia, it is illegal for you to drive a car. But if you get abducted as a woman from Saudi Arabia, they will let you fly the ship, no insurance, no license, nothing. They'll just let you fly the ship. So the thing is, when you look at these stats, I say it's critically important to look at why are these high numbers. 37% of all experiencers have had near-death experiences. So you have these things, and people will say, well, I'm not going to listen to experiencers because they just sort of believe they're having these experiences. And I'll say, yes, it's true. It's all belief. But you believe you're a skeptic. You believe you're a scientist. You believe the world is flat or round. You believe that it's solid. It's all belief. I will agree it's all belief. But when you get this number of people who are giving these very definite numbers and very definite directions to where we should be going, isn't it incumbent on us to talk to these people and to question them and to find out if they're telling the truth? I don't mind if you are skeptical going in there, but to not talk to these people, and that's what happened in the UFO community. Nobody will even talk to these people because you can't measure it. You can't, it's not, they don't see it as scientific. And so when you look at particularly, I'm still trying to convince the Free Society, they've gone with a second survey to look at the people who have had the downloads and what kind of physics downloads and if the person has any physics background or whatever. And they're collecting all this material and doing long interviews with these people. But I said you got to look at the key one is the flying of the ship. Because when I first did got my consciousness download, I gave up the documents and I went to lecturing on consciousness. The first consciousness lecture I gave was in 2013 in Phoenix, Arizona. At the end of the lecture, the woman who runs the Phoenix MUFON group said to me, "Are you still going to talk to Pam?" And I thought, well, I must have agreed to talk. I said, okay. And I figured maybe I agreed to talk to this woman, or I don't know what's going on. So I was at a house on the Monday, staying there, and she said, Pam's going to come to the house and you can talk to her. So Pam comes to the door. She's in her 70s with her partner, and they come in and she says, what did Stacy tell you about me? And I said, I don't know, I'm just supposed to talk to you. That's good. She sits down, she starts talking about remote viewing, and she's had these experiences or whatever. And then she said, and I was flying the ship last night. And I said, you were what? And she said, I was flying the ship. I said, they let you fly the flying saucer? And she said, yeah, I've flown 3 different models. And at that point, I'd never heard this. In 37 years, I had never heard this. I thought she was totally nuts. And so then I said, well, how do you fly a flying saucer? And she says, well, you do it with your mind. And as soon as I heard that, I realized why they'd set me up to talk to this woman. And she said, and now I've got 36 experiencers, and I've got about 6 of them on tape describing in detail. I say, okay, start from the word, start from the beginning, exactly how do you fly a ship, what do you do first, second? Everybody says the same thing. There is no steering wheel. You put your hand on a pad. You become one with the ship. The ship is alive, you're alive, you become, and you take your hand off, and then wherever you think you want to go. You can just move the ship with your mind. And that's how it's done. And that would be one of the reasons why the government has not released what they know, because I can pretty well guarantee you they do not understand this very well. Because when you hear the people actually describe this, it's very, very complex. It's very, you can see that they're like hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us in terms of the ship changing size and shape and all this kind of stuff. So that's where it sort of reinforced the fact that consciousness is the key to this whole thing, that aliens are telepathic. and that the ship is alive, and that you interact with the ship and you become one with the ship, this oneness concept. And that's how they get here. In fact, part of my download was two people. One was Dr. Eric Walker, Penn State University president, who had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, PhD in engineering, did engineering studies for Eisenhower. And when we asked him about the control group, we said, there was a guy from Great Britain, an Iranian guy from Great Britain was interviewing him. He said, Dr. Walker, what about the control group? Is it still just 12 people, or is it international? Is it just American? And he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy in Great Britain went, well, he didn't have an answer. And Walker answered his own question. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understood it. Very few people understand it. I had no idea what he was talking about because it didn't even relate to the question. 2 years later, 1993, Ben Rich, who's head of Lockheed Skunk Works, is giving a lecture to the engineering alumni at UCLA. The last slide he shows is a flying saucer. And he says, we now have the technology to take ET home. We've discovered the mistake in the equation. It's not going to take a lifetime to do, but it's going to take an act of God to get it out of Congress because it's so deep black. One of the people in the audience was Jan Hartson, the present international director of MUFON. Jan Hartson is an experiencer. He had an experience in his backyard with his brother at 9 years old. The thing was about 30 feet away in his backyard, 6:30 Saturday morning. He became obsessed with building a flying saucer. He became an electrical engineer so he could do this. Then he became director of MUFON. He's in the audience. He's sitting with another researcher, and he looks over at this Keller guy who was with him. He said, did you hear what he said? Did you hear they got the technology? And he's like, this is my lifelong dream. My whole life, I wanted to know this whole thing. So as Ben Rich is leaving the building, he figures, this is my chance. He goes running after Ben as he's going out the door, and he said, Ben, I've been obsessed with flying saucers my whole life. I need to know, how do they get here? How does it work? And Ben Rich looks around and he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan said, I didn't expect a question. So he said, it means everything in time and space is connected? And he said, that's how it works. Gets in his car and drives away. And so that's the whole thing. It's this oneness thing, which I say is so important, because if you believe that we're random physical particles in time and space, you're never going to get off this planet, because you can't fly that distance. You can't carry that amount of food. And that's the scientific argument, is they can't get here from there. The distances are too big. But if you understand that one concept of oneness, entangled particles, all the quantum physics thing, that there may not be time and space, that everything is one, everything is connected, and if you make this connection, like entangled particles, where if you change the spin of this particle, the entangled particle on the other side of the universe will instantly change. That may be how it works. That if you understand everything's one, then you simply can change in your mind the location, and you will move through time and space instantaneously. So that's why I say the oneness concept is how they get here. They understand oneness, that there is no time and space, everything's connected in time and space, which discounts the evil alien thing. If you understand that everything is one, everything's connected, then you can't come here and suddenly say separation. It's me versus you. Good aliens, bad aliens. That's why I really doubt that there's evil aliens, because that's how they get here, understanding this concept of oneness. When it comes to vibration and how that fits into the whole scenario, the way I look at it is through a lot of the channeling, that people do channeling and ask the questions, and that's what they'll describe. Everything is a vibration, that there really is no physical world, that the way I understand it is consciousness is still, consciousness is one, and then when consciousness starts to vibrate, or as one of the people who got a download said, if it vibrates, it's illusion. So then the physical world at various levels. But I don't look at levels, because once you create nouns rather than verbs, it's a verb process, it's a moving process. But what we do, because we believe in separation, is we want to have levels. So we say there's 9 levels of the universe, there's multi-dimensions, and we sort of break it into, because we can understand levels and stuff like that in terms of separate. But what I would say, it's more like water. It's like if you go into the water, the closer you're to the top of the water, the more light there is, the clearer you can see. So it's all vibration. And there is I think a law that They're at a higher vibration, we're at a lower vibration. And for example, you'll have the stories of the alien hybrids, where these children, and the children will only interact with the parents on one occasion. They'll have the child, they take the child, they bring it back one time, and the parent has to hold the child. You've heard this bonding story, and it's to bond with the child, and that is the last time they will see the child. The child is gone. And I would think that is an indication of this vibration thing, that that child cannot live on this world, because they are on a different vibrational frequency. So they are able to come into our frequency, so they can come into the physical world, take on a physical form, and then they can move back into their higher vibration. Almost like the thing where people will talk about the fact that it's a physical phenomenon. And I say, if you look at the free survey and you look at the #1 reported alien, it is not an alien. It is a ball of light. It is an etheric type form. That is the #1 reported experience. The grays is #3. #2 is a humanoid type thing. So my question then is, and people will describe this, it's a ball of light and it changes into an alien. And then it goes back to a ball of light. So my question is, does a ball of light get up in the morning and have toast, bacon, eggs, and coffee? And no, they can move into the physical world, they can move back out, so they can move their vibration down to meet us, but they can't really, we can't live in their vibration, and we have to, so what they're doing is they're moving our vibration, and everything is vibration, and it'd be the same thing as psychic experiences or remote viewing or any of these type of things. Everybody has the ability to do it, and what you're able to, if you're able to move into that, change your frequency of your body through whatever technique you're using, you're able to access. It's there for everybody. All the information is there in the Akashic field or wherever. It's a matter of accessing, that you don't have any knowledge to access. Your beliefs keep you in this physical world. And the more you understand about the techniques and stuff, you can break out of this, you can increase your vibration by doing certain things, and you can move up. In fact, one of the stories that's out now is this story of the portal thing, that there's supposedly, the government is trying to get out the story that there is a portal. There are a number of portals. And the main guy that's leaking, his name is Dr. Ronald Pandolfi, who's run the CIA UFO desk since 1983. He and his wife are putting this out. And for some reason, they want us to believe there's a portal. Now, when I first heard that, I thought, it's crazy stuff. I mean, it's like UFOs. I mean, it's crazy. It's science fiction stuff. They're making this stuff up. They're pulling it out of science fiction. Now, I talked to enough people who basically said, yes, this portal story is true, that there is this portal. And I've got a very close friend, Paula Harris. I don't know whether any of you've interviewed her, but Paula Harris actually tells this story about going through a portal in 2014, 2015. And when I first heard her tell the story, I said, what? And she told me the story, but it was this vibrational story. It's the fact that there was this guy from South America who was in charge. Antaral was the being, and they went to Mount Shasta, and they fasted for 2 days, and they meditated for 2 days. And this is all stuff to raise your vibration, that you can't do it and not eat meat and all this kind of stuff. So they have all these things which are supposedly raising your vibration. And then when the time comes, Paula tells me the story that they see a UFO, and then this Ricardo comes up to her and says, Antaral is here. Are you ready for this? And she said she just like freaked out. She's like, oh, I don't know. And she's like, well, you know, what's going to happen? So they got up and they go into this forest. They pick 7 people that are going to go through this portal type thing. And they call it a portal. See, I didn't really know what a portal is. So she said they were there, and the ground looked, there's sparkles on the ground, and then this fog starts coming out of the ground, and she had to hold hands. There's 3 women, and they had to hold hands. And Ricardo says, you do not let go of the person's hand beside you until you're through this foggy mist thing that's coming up. So they go, and she said, when they got through this mist that was coming off the ground, she said it was the scariest moment of her life when she had to let go of these women's hands. And she said when she did, suddenly this 9-foot-tall alien is there, and he's talking in this voice that she couldn't understand. And all she could remember is one thing where he said, thank you. And that's the only thing she remembered. And then the next year, she goes through this thing again, and they're describing it as a portal. Now what the CIA is describing is a portal where on the other side, they actually call it a wishing well, that when you get on the other side, you can actually manifest But again, it has this idea of it being in a sort of a different dimension, and you can move back and forth through this thing. But I would say it's the vibration is the key to everything. Everything vibrates. And so they're just on a different vibration, or they're on a different frequency that you would even get, for example, with learning how to do lucid dreaming or these kind of things, because they will describe the same sort of thing, where you enter this world where you can actually manifest things and you can ask questions and get answers and stuff like that. And a lot of people will report to me, they'll say, well, I was never abducted, but I had dreams about them all the time. And one of the channeling sessions, the alien said, we come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world. And that's the thing, you're in this different vibrational, you move to a different state of mind into this sort of dream world, and then you're more in their world. So they're in this dream world moving through, but it's more, it's not a level thing. It's more like a thing with water, that you're going into deeper water, or you're going closer to the light, almost like the idea of light. Because the next book I'm going to do is these confusions that we get in life. And one of them is the thing about light and darkness. So people believe the separation thing. There's light and there's darkness. And there isn't. There's just light. The farther you get away from the light, the darker it gets. But there is no light. There is no dark. Darkness is not a thing unto itself. It's just the absence of light. There is only light. And the farther you get away, the less light there is. So it's these kind of things where it's all one, and we sort of try to divide it into little pieces, because in this world we can sort of understand it. And then we come to this random idea that it's just random particles. It's all random, it's accidental, it's meaningless, we're just banging into each other. But it doesn't explain anything that happens in ufology. It doesn't explain any of the mental stuff, it doesn't explain what the aliens are doing. It doesn't go anywhere. So you have to get into this idea of the consciousness, of the vibration particularly, that everything is a wave, everything is vibration, even in quantum physics. You have this non-local wave. When there's an observer, the non-local wave breaks down and the particle takes a position in time and space. But everything is waves, it's all vibration. And when people start to understand that and actually believe it, actually use it rather than just believe it as being a concept, then you can start understanding what they're doing. Because they're not doing anything different. It's not really magic. It's just they're doing things that we don't understand, that we just don't have the understanding. We don't know how to move into their world, and we don't have the knowledge. If we had the knowledge, there would be no magic. It's almost like 500 years ago, if somebody saw an airplane, they would say it's magic. It's not. It's just you don't know how you're not prepared for that technology. You just don't have the background. So you learn consciousness is basic, everything vibrates, and you get into that world where you start to understand what's going on. And it's not as magical as people think it is. For example, I'll give you another example. A lot of people, when they talk about when they're abducted, they'll say, oh, they took me through the wall. And because we believe in this physical universe, you go, that's absolutely crazy. I mean, there's no way you went through the wall or the window or whatever. But if you understand the fact that it used to be 99.99913 times % of the atom is space, then it's all space. But now the figure is actually, because all the subatomic particles are all space, they're not all packed together in one solid thing, it's now 10 to the 53rd pieces of space for every piece of what we think is matter. And to give you an idea how big that is, there are 10 to the 52nd acres in the Milky Way, which would mean that 1 acre in the Milky Way is matter, the rest is all space. Like, it's literally all space. So if you come to that understanding, same as frequency, you start to understand frequency. If you understand the fact that everything is space, how hard is it for an alien to take a person who's all space and put them through a wall that's all space? It's just, you've got to do the vibration thing that holds the matter together. And if you can break those bonds or whatever they're doing, you can put the person through the wall with no problem, because it's all just space. And we just make assumption that I'm solid, the wall's solid, so you can't go through. And so it's these misunderstandings, and that's my next book, is to look at the various misunderstandings that we have that sort of really throw us off. It's not that we're doing the wrong thing, it's just we make a bunch of assumptions that aren't true. When it comes to the question of the conscious elevation of this whole process, the way I look at things is that people in America, especially in the West, say in the West, We want everything and we want it yesterday. I have great compassion because the way I came through my experience, I take credit for nothing. I did not want to see that UFO. It was only because it was filmed a second time and put on TV that I went out there. When I had my download experience, I did not want to be in that room. I had no intention of being in that room. So I got dragged kicking and screaming. Even the music thing, I tell the story about the music thing. When I got involved with the music thing, I'm a musical idiot. I don't play any musical instruments. I don't listen to music. And when I was contacted by this prominent experiencer, Chris Bledsoe, and he said, the shining lady that is involved, she's above the aliens, this lady said to contact Grant and tell him that the message is in the music. I thought, well, you're wasting your time because, I mean, I'm not into music. And it turned out that Neil Young was one of the examples. And that got me dragged in because Neil Young grew up in my city. So I have been dragged kicking and screaming from step to step. So I have great compassion for people who don't understand. And I always say that if it weren't for my experiences, I would probably be in the nuts and bolts still. And the universe always has been and always will be, and that we as beings always have been and always will be. So I always sort of fight against people who say, we need disclosure now, and I say, we've got eternity. It's all about living, and the basic bottom line is, you and I, if it's a multiple life thing, if it's not, if it's just one life, then it all changes. But if it's multiple lives, reincarnation, everything changes. Because then the situation is, you and I both agreed before we came into this life to do certain things, to achieve certain things. We came into this world, we are going to leave this world, we're going to die. And the only thing that we have to worry about is what did I assign myself to do, and am I doing it? So we work on our own evolution, and the way what happens is, it's almost like the way the CIA builds the UFO story, is they put this stuff in fictional stories in Hollywood, and the more people talk about it, the more you and I discuss this and we bring up these ideas, the higher the consciousness rises. That things don't, we are no different than any other social or political movement. The women's right to vote, Hillary Clinton talks about this. 1848 was the first time that the women's right to vote issue was brought up, and they started to build groups and demonstrate and stuff like that. They didn't get the vote till 1920. It was a long overnight. Same as Greenpeace, the environmental movements. It was decades and decades and decades before they ever got off the ground. And with the women's right to vote, even when they got the right to vote, they're still not equal. So we're no different than any other social political movement, is that we don't get to have disclosure, or we don't get to have the answer because we think it's important. A lot of kids are dying of childhood cancer, and they will die because nobody cares, because there's only 10 of them that have that certain disease. Because it's important doesn't mean it has to be disclosed. The only thing that's important is, what is my contribution to this thing, and that we have eternity to do this. So that if somebody doesn't understand, I was at that level one time, and so I've lived by two premises. I was raised in a very religious family, and so I was very familiar with the Bible, and in the Bible it says, to whom much is given, much is expected. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, I was obsessed with near-death experiences and Edgar Cayce. And Edgar Cayce said, knowledge not used is sin. So those are the things that have always driven me in my life, is if you don't know what's going on in the UFO field, you're ignorant of the UFO field, you don't believe it, you're going to be cut to slack. But if you know what's going on, you have the answers, and you don't do anything with it, you're in a way worse situation. It's like, to whom much is given, much is expected. So I feel honored to be in the UFO field, because I tell people that you're in the UFO field, and a lot of experiencers, because it can be a little bit of a tough life, or even if you're a researcher, you're not getting respect. And I say, you got to realize in the UFO field that you are in the Super Bowl of all stories. This is the biggest story that will ever be told. And you could have been an untouchable in the streets of Calcutta, India, and you could spend your life in a junkyard every day looking for something valuable enough to sell for food for tomorrow. You didn't get that life. You got to be playing in the Super Bowl of all stories, and you should feel honored to be in this game, that you got to play in this game, you got to be at the leading edge of this story, and then do what you're supposed to do to elevate the story. So when you tell people the experiences, they realize like, yes, I do have a mission, I have something important to do, and try to emphasize to people that we have this very exciting story that we're telling, and that we understand more than we think that the people on the street understand. But that gives you a big responsibility to do something with that knowledge. And so you do your videos, I do my lecture things, and that's all I say to people is do as much as you can, and appreciate the fact that you got to play in this game, and nothing will go wrong. Because I had 3 big events. I had the download experience that influenced me. I had the UFO experience. The third thing that influenced me, it was a lecture I didn't want to go in. It was a lecture by Dr. Michael Newton. Dr. Michael Newton is famous for the theory about life between lives. So he will take someone to a past life, he'll let them die, and then he'll say, okay, what's happening next? And he takes them into the world between lives. And it's this spirit world where you go in front of the council, and you have a life review and stuff like that. And he did 7,000 people, and everybody said the same thing. And what he said, which influenced me greatly, is when you die, you're met by former people in your family or whatever that have died, that help lead you over. You have a spirit guide that goes with you, and you go in front of the life review. But you'll have between 3 and 12 people on this life review. The guide will stand on your left-hand side, behind you on the left-hand side, and you'll be facing these people, and they only ask you one question: how did it work out? Because you're the person that set it up. You're the person that did the play. You're the one that said, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to achieve this, and I want to achieve that. And they asked Newton, they said, what do people say? He says, everybody says the same thing: I could have done more. They feel regret. I didn't do this, I said I was going to do this, I said I was going to do this, I didn't do this. And they feel regret that they didn't do enough with their life. And so to me, that's the way I live my life, is not what anybody else is doing, even though sometimes you get sort of dragged into this, that these people don't understand, and you're trying to evangelize them and bring them over to your side and stuff. But in the end, it basically comes down to what am I doing here? And am I doing what I'm supposed to do here? If it's only one life, then that doesn't exist. But if it's multiple lives, I'll guarantee that's the scenario, is that we've agreed to do something, and the question is, are we doing it? My main website is presidentialufo.com. I don't put that much on it anymore. I recommend a site, if people are interested in downloads and music and stuff. I have a Facebook site called Paranormal World of Creativity. Facebook site, and I put out all the download stuff that comes up, the new music things that I find. I've just released 3 books. One is the Clinton UFO Storybook, which details the very great involvement of the Clintons over the years in the UFO mystery. I released a book called Inspire the Creative World of the Paranormal World of Creativity, where I go through savants, Nobel Prizes, music, art, all the different faculties of people who were inspired and got ideas instantaneously, and some very bizarre stories, near-death experiences, stuff like that. I did that book, and then the book I've just released last week was Managing Magic, the Government UFO Disclosure Plan, which looks at what I say is a plan over 70 years to gradually leak the UFO story to the UFO community. And I have a book coming out. It's on Amazon right now, taking orders. It'll be released in August. And that is the story of how I got dragged down the rabbit hole. And that was the book that I never could get published in the 1970s. It's now been published, and it's now had an option for a movie on it. And that story is called Charlie Red Star. And it ties in the nuclear weapons, which is a critically important part of the UFO phenomena. I lived just north of the American border, and just south of us was 300 Minuteman III nuclear missiles. And the #1 target of the Russians was those missiles. It's not New York, it's not Washington, because unless you take out the American missiles, you're not going to see New York getting destroyed. So that was the #1 target, and in 1975, when I had my sightings, when this town got inundated, they put 100 new nuclear weapons in there, and they were put in there to shoot down the Russian missiles which would try to take out the North Dakota missiles. And it was pre-Star Wars. It was the Star Wars on the ground. And it was there for only 1 year, 1975. That's when all these sightings. So I detail the connection to the nuclear weapons, and I tell this whole story of this town where when I polled the high school, it was over 50% of the kids in the high school said, yes, they had seen this thing. It was the whole town knew this thing was there. And so that book will be released in August. And that's basically what I'm doing right now.